Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Bava Batra Daf Yud Gimel. We're going to begin on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. V'lo es hatraklin chulu. So our Mishnah said that when you have partners, they can only divide up when, after it's divided, it has some utility and it has the same name. However, if it has such a small amount after it's divided up that it really does not have much utility, so then the din is that it's not divided. So on this, the Gemara wonders if there's another option. Ein behen kedei lezeh kedei lezeh mahu. What do we do? Is there any other option if there's not enough for both of them to be able to divide it evenly? Rabbi Yehuda omer is dina de good o ogud. Rav Nachman omer leis dina de good o ogud. So what does this mean? It says Rashi, zeh sheroitz l'chalik. The one who wants to basically dissolve their partnership, omer lezeh she'ein roitz l'chalik. He says to the other guy, I'm going to give you an option. O kutzli damim uknei locha chelki, wani ekotz damim vetenocha b'chelkcha. She avshi b'shutvuscha. I'm not interested in being a partner with you anymore, so I'm going to give you an option. Either you buy my half, and therefore you keep the whole thing, or I'll buy your half, and then I'll keep the whole thing. That's the question, whether or not there is such a din. So it's a machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda says that other person could be compelled to either do one or the other, and Rav Nachman says no. Says Rashi, I want to remain partners, and I'm not interested in this din, in this idea. So I'm only rebel Rav Nachman. So you, Rav Nachman, good that the other partner who refuses to dissolve the partnership doesn't have to accept this deal. So b'chor poshet. What is the deal when we have a firstborn son and a other son, in which we know that the b'chor gets pishtaim, he gets double? Eved, the father left an eved, ubehema a non-kosher animal. So ketzad oisen. What is done in this situation? Says Rashi, Chieshel chalkan. Obviously, you can't divide an eved in half. So ketzad yasu. B'chor pashid detricha milsel yeshitvan ba. The reason why it mentions this is because it's a very difficult form of partnership. It's not like a 50-50 deal. It's a 2/3, 1/3 situation. And because of that, it's giving this example that there's a greater likelihood in this situation where they're not going to be interested in remaining partners because it's such an unusual percentage. So big deal. One guy will work on one day, for him one day, and the Eved will work for the other guy for 2 days. It'll be a 3-day rotation. So Meisvei, Misha Chetzav, Eved v'Chetzav ben Chayrin, elsewhere, that you have a person who is half a slave, half free, which is only in a situation where you have partnerships. You have a partner that freed him, the other partner didn't free him, so he's half free and half a slave. Oivid is Rabbi Yom Echad is Atzma Yom Echad. Divrei Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel originally said this idea that you could split the work. Beis Shammai said, Tikantem es Rabbi es Atzmo Tikantem. You figured out the issue of him working, but his own personal life will never be resolved. Because Lisa Shivchenu Yachol, Lisa Bas Chayrenu Yachol. He can't marry a Shivcha because he's partially free. He can't marry a Bas Chayrin because he's partially a slave. So Yavatel, you want to say that he can't have a relationship? The world is for procreation. We're going to force this guy to make him free. And he's going to basically write a star on the other half. So this person who freed him will be reimbursed for the half. Even Beis Hillel eventually agreed to that. Says Rashi, Taima dimnei tikkun oilam. The whole reason is because of tikkun oilam, so you can get married. Holav mishum pura v'rivya. If it wasn't this issue of having children and having a relationship, loi karfinin le, we would not force him. Loi matzi eved l'meimar, that Eved would not be able to say l'meimar le okutz b'damim v'etin locha b'chelkcha. So we see actually, seemingly that this is in support of Rav Nachman, that he holds that there is no din of dina de good o good, which is what it sounds like here as well. So shani hacha de good ika good de o good ika good leka. In this situation, it's different. Says Rashi, ha'eved yachol liknois, because the eved could be acquired by himself being free. But he can't say acquire my portion. Shein damim ben chayrin. Shein eved ivri nimchar el l'sheish, because he's only going to be a slave for 6 years, so he can't sell himself this other half. So it can either go. The only way it can work is for him to go completely free, not to go completely as a slave, because he can only work for 6 years anyway. Okay, and there's a very lengthy Taisus over here. Ayin Sham. Tashma. Shnei. Okay, let's look at question 13. Chatzi v'eved chatzi ben chayrin kaifanais rabbi v'oisanais ben chayrin. Ma haraya shehaviu mekan le'inyan is dined gudu or gudu ma hadechia raya. So what was the proof? So we see from here that we said that we're going to force this other guy, the master, to free him, but only because of tikkun olam. So this way he'll be able to get married and have children. Otherwise, we would not force this master to do so, and the Eved cannot say this concept of good or ogud, of allow me to, I'll give to you the value of your portion, etc. So therefore, it must be we don't hold of good or good. The answer is no. Over here, it's different. The lake good. El ogud. Shein yachal limchar chelik ben chayrin la'adainai. He can't sell his portion of being free to his master. It only goes in one direction. Good or ogud has to be that you're giving them an option. You're giving them two choices. Over here, there aren't two choices. Tashma. Shnei achin, you have two brothers. Echad ani v'echad asher. One's poor, one's rich. It's like I'm poor, and all of a sudden I was given a bathhouse or an aisle of press. So Austin l'sachar, so it was given to be rented out. Chasachol emsa, then they'll split the proceeds, the rental. Austin l'Atzmai was given for themselves, not to be rented. Hari asher oimer ani, so the rich person can say to the poor, as we continue to Yud Gimel and Beis, he could always say, Kach l'cha avadim, you take the slaves, b'yirchatzu b'merchatz. Says Rashi, take for yourself the slaves, shichamu moisai, to warm it up, urchaitzbon, to bathe in it. V'lomatzi anil meimar, the poor person can't say, kan nechelki, I want you to purchase my portion. I am not interested in this. Kach l'cha zesim uvavasi b'beis abad. So what do we see? That clearly the usher is able to make this statement, and the ani cannot say, I'm not interested. So again, it must be because leika good or all good. Rand says, again, hasam nami goodika or good leika. Here, all that can happen is the poor person can sell his portion, but not that he's able to buy off his brother's half portion. He doesn't have the money to do so. And therefore, everyone would agree. Tashma. Kol she'iu yichal leiku shmo. All of our Mishnah ended. The zaklal, the general rule, is anytime if we would split it up, the name is still there, it still has utility, chok, and then we divide it. So imla, but if not, mal noisabadaman. We evaluate it by money. So what does that mean? Rashi says, hainu good or agud. This is mamish, the case of good or agud. Tenoihi. The truth is, it's a machokas tenoim. Design. Toilat ashir yani pachis shaimin lo. So if a person says Rashi, let's say that it's a small courtyard. This guy said, let's divide it. You take the 4, and I'll take the leftover. So let's say it's only 6 amos. You take the 4 amos, which has utility, and I'll take the small amount of 2. So in that case, Shemilo will listen to him, because after all, if we would divide it up 4 and 4, that would work. So you're still getting the 4, I'll just get the 2, and that's it. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer in Shem, we're not going to listen. So hey Chadami. If it's exactly as we're saying, so my time to Shimon Gamliel. Why would Rabbi Shimon Gamliel say we don't listen to him? This guy who's getting the 4 is gaining. He's getting more than his half. So why would he not say that it works? There's really his words missing. This was what happened. Tashir, you take the 4, Vani Pachlis, and I'll get the other 2. Shaimin lo. V'gudo ogud nami shaimin lo. And we add in, or gudo ogud. I'll buy the whole chutzner, or you buy the whole chutzner. In shaimin lo. In shaimin lo. So therefore we say it's a machlokas whether good or good. Well, if that's the case, by time so why would Rav Gamliel not agree to this? Mishum de if I pay you the difference, then I do not have the money in which to give to you. So I don't have the ability to do so. I don't have the money to give you. But matana lo nichali, so you're going to say, well, you're going to give it to me as a gift? The truth is, I don't want a gift, because the pasuk says that someone who accepts a gift will live. And therefore, someone who hates gifts, rather, will live. And I don't, therefore, wish to accept a gift. Question 14. Chatzer she'ein ba shir chaluka, him shaymin le'echad lases lechaver kashir chaluka, v'yitel rakas ha'maiser, again, you get the 4, and I get the 2, madua. So according to Tanakam, we listen. Rav Shmuel says no. Why? So he either said, well, because there's a concept where they say good or good. If it's for money, ein li mois, I don't have money to do this. Iba matana, if it's for a gift, okay, so that's question 14. Also question TB 28. Machlokas, so I wrote Machlokas im yesh din good or good olo, mipnei she'im hu ani, hu lo l'shalem es chetziai, v'gam b'matana lo roitza mipnei sana matana s'chiyachia. Okay, so that is, let's see, Chatzer she'en b'ashir chalukah, v'hu yitel rakas has hamoiser madua. So it's not exact. This was the Havamina of the Gemara, whether we say good or good. And again, the maskana is that because maybe we're dealing with a situation where the person only has the ability to receive it, but not to be able to actually to make this purchase, and this person doesn't have the ability to be able to make this purchase, and he doesn't want to accept it as a gift. Okay, about Rabbi Yosef, Had Rabbi Yehuda Dishmolhi. This whole this notion of what Rabbi Yehuda says is actually in accordance to the sheet of Shmuel. Nan, the Kisvei Kodesh. When it comes to partners who own, let's say, a Sefer Torah, Afal Pi Sheshneim Roitzin, even if both of them are interested in it, Lo Yachloku, we still will not divide it up because it's a bizayon to split a Sefer Torah or a Sefer in half. The Yomer Shmuel, Lo Shanu Ella Bekerach Echad. The only time we say this is if it's one scroll, says Rashi. Kol Seferim Asuin Begilyain. They're all written like in a scroll. The Yemi Yabiyehu Beistim Yachol. If you would split up one scroll, it's a bezayin. However, if there's two, let's say they own 2 different scrolls. So in that situation, you could divide it. And we're thinking this is a case of even if both of them are not interested. It says Rashi, a Torah and a Navi don't have the same value. The elays didn't good or good. If you don't hold of good or good, hechu kaifehu ze oimer anilo etinlocha oidef. One says, I'm not interested in doing this. So again, the Torah is worth a lot more than the Navi. So if they split it, it's not going to be evenly distributed. The other person has to pay the difference of the money. If there's no din of good or good, so my area bekerach echad krichin nami. You would also say that if they're 2 separate scrolls, it would also be a problem. So Tirgum Rav Shalman b'shneim roitzin. No, our mission is actually talking about in a situation where even if they do want, we're not going to divide it up because it's still a bizayon to split up one sefer. However, if they're 2, then it's not a problem. If they want to do that, then one can get one, the other one can get the other one. Not a problem. Omer Meimer. Hilchasa, what is the halacha after all of this? After all said and done, is dina de good or all good. We talk a whole like this. Armuli Rav Ashula Meimer. Had Rav Nachman, that statement of Rav Nachman, my Armule, lo shemili, koloimer lo svirli. I actually don't hold of this. But lo, you don't hold like that. Vaha Rabbi Bar Chinana, Rab Dimi Bar Chinana, these 2 great sages, Shavagu Avua Tarti Amasa, these 2 brothers, there was left over by their father 2 maidservants. Chadi Yada Afya Abishuli, one knew how to cook and bake. V'chadi Yada Pilcha V'Navel, the other one knew how to weave and to sew. V'yasachem Rabba, Yermalhu Leis Dina de Good or Agud. Actually, they said clearly that there's no din of good or agud regarding this. So our answer is that it's true, but that doesn't mean necessarily we don't paskin of good or agud. But Shani Hassam is different over here when it comes to the case of two maidservants. Why? Delomar miboyle tervayu, lomar miboyle tervayu. Both of them need both things. I need to eat, and you need to eat. You need clothing, and I need clothing. So therefore, they both of them together, combined, take care of that which is needed. So therefore, it's not something that could be split up. Kikar malay shakal ad chada v'yana chada lav gudo o gudhu. So, however, when he said shakal ad, you take one and I take one, lav gudo o gudhu. That's not a situation of gudo o gud. But Torah you need, Nevi'im you need. How could it be that you can split up? One gets a Torah, one gets a Navi. It's just like one person needs both the cooking and the weaving. They need both. You need a Torah and you need a Navi. So Har Tergum Rav Shalman Kishiratsu. Again, it's because in that case, it's where they agreed to the splitting. They wanted to dissolve their partnership. That's different. If they both want to do it, then they can divide it up. When there's two of them, there's no bazayin. You take the Torah, I take the Navi, and maybe I'll give you a little bit more money because I have the Torah, which is more expensive. Okay, Tanabanan. Madbik Adam Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim Ke'echad. Rameir. According to Rameir, he holds you can write the Torah, Nevi'im, Uksuvim all on one big scroll. Not a problem. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Torah B'fnei Atzman Nevi'im B'fnei Atzman Uksuvim B'fnei Atzman. No, the Torah itself, the Chamisha Chumshi Torah, have to be written in one scroll. You cannot add the Nevi'im and Ksuvim to it. That doesn't work. The Chachamim say that they all have to be completely separate. V'yam Rabbi Yehuda Masa B'Baisus Ben Zunin, was a story Shahayoloi Shmoin Nevi'im Midubakim Ke'echad, that they actually had 8 Nevi'im that were all attached. Al Pir B'Lezim and Azariah. Yeshamrim Lo Hayolo El Echad Echad B'Fnei Atzmai. And they only had one, and it was by itself. It was actually a time where all three were connected. There was a Torah, Navi, and Ksuvim, all in one huge scroll. In Vihich Sharnum, and he said it was okay, it was kosher. Now, Ben Chumash Shel Chumash Shel Torah Arba Shitin. After you finish Sefer Bereshis, you can't just immediately start Shemos. There has to be a space of 4 empty lines in between. L'chein bein kol navi v'navi. Also, when it comes to between each navi, after you finish, let's say, writing Shoftim, and you then have afterwards Shmuel Aleph, you have to have separation. With a navi, you have to have 4. However, navi shel shnei masar, which the Sfarim are smaller, when they're together, gimel shitin. There only has to be a 3-line separation. U'masayim Milamata, when you finish the end of a sefer at the bottom, you could begin right on the top, which means you don't have to skip any lines. Even though normally you do have to skip 3 or 4 lines, depending on what we're talking about. But if you finish the sefer at the very bottom of the scroll, the very top of it, you can start right away. You don't have to skip lines right there. Okay. Tanobam. If a person wants to write all Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim on one big scroll, you can combine them. And you do at the beginning, how much space should there be in the beginning before you start writing on the scroll? It has to be kedei legoil omud. There has to be enough space to wrap around the rod. In other words, you have to have some blank parchment. You can't start at the very, very beginning of the paper, of the parchment, like right here. You have to have enough space so that the paper can wrap around the pole. Okay, so that's something which again needs to be done. U'b'seifo, at the end of a sefer, kedei logol hekef. It has to be enough empty parchment that again you could roll it all the way around the scroll itself. So there's all this empty space at the end. There's extra parchment that it can be rolled all the way around. Okay, Masayim Lomata. You begin at the bottom, and you begin at the top. Says Rashi, the Sefer Gedei legal hekef she'ein oisa shnei amudim legoylon leemsa kamo shanu oisa l'sefer Torah. A Sefer Torah has 2 scrolls, 2 sides, 2 poles. However, when it comes to a Navi, Like for example, in Megillas Esther, there's only one. There's only one side. So el goyim etchilas l'seifa v'karach hachelik al kol hahekif. So therefore, when you finish, so it should be that it's large enough enough cloth that it can go all around its circumference. Okay, that's again assuming that the pole is at the beginning, right? And therefore, at the beginning is where it's wrapped around, and then at the very end you should have space to go around it. Even though a lot of them may be fakir, like a Megillas Esther doesn't have a pole at all. Okay, but that's still the idea. Yodal Dominov. The imbo lachtoich chaytech. If a person wants to cut, he can cut. What does that mean? Says Rashi. So my kaim, what does that mean? So hachikamer. Shim bo lachtoich chaytech. The idea is malam lememra hakol. So what does that mean? Malamember hakol modim the im kol echad echad the atzmut fe'odef hachikamer. Umaskil milamalo. You begin at the top. Below yaniach chalok. Not to have empty lines at the top. Because if you would cut it, it's cut. In other words, if you have all these different svarim, and then you decide to separate Shmuel Aleph from Shoftim from Yoshua, and you cut it, right? You cut the parchment, so it's still okay, it's still kosher. But the problem is if you started not at the top, but you had lines skipping at the top, so afterwards it's gonna. Why'd you skip a few lines? Because because the sefer ended, so you want to begin maybe by skipping a few lines. But that's normal. That's if it's on the same column. But once it ends on the bottom, if you would start on the next column, not at the top, if you would decide to cut it, it's going to then look strange. Why did you not write on the top? Of course, the reason is because of the way the sefer was connected to another one, but it still doesn't look good, and therefore, for that reason, you write it. You start on the top. Ramini, for the Gemara, he asks a question: Techil sefer v'seifo, the beginning and the end is kedei legoil legoil. So kedei legoil my. So what does that mean? I kedei legoil amud. If it's to wrap around a pole, kasha hekif. It's a kasha. I thought you had to do the whole circumference of the cloth. Ikadei legoil hekif. It's the whole circumference. Kasha omud. So which one is it? So Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yitzchak, stadim katani. Actually, you have to begin with the end of the Torah. In other words, let's see what Rashi says. Let's stadim katani. Again, you begin with the end of the Torah. Rav Ashi Omer Kitanya Hahi b'Sefer Torah. Again, when we're talking about a Sefer Torah, it's different than the other Sifrei Nach, because other Sifrei Nach there's only one pole. When it comes to Sefer Torah, there's two on both sides. Therefore, because of that, it makes sense that it says that when it comes to a Sefer Torah, the Chila Sefer V'Seifa Kedei L'Goyel, both of them have to be the same because both of them have a pole, and therefore that's what it's referring to. Kedesanya. Kol svarim, all regular svarim, which are one-sided, niglolim et chilasim l'seifon. You roll it up from beginning to end, so that the end needs this circumference. The Sefer Torah, which is on both sides, the poles, nigol siyasai, it's rolled in the middle. Yaisel omud elach ve'elach. Therefore, you have to have the amount of an omud of one column on both sides. This is taka how they used to write their svarim there. Okay, so again, since it's on two rods, so it has to be the same on both sides, as opposed to the Navi, which is on only one side. So that's the idea behind this. Okay, let's look at question. So we saw question 14. Let's look at question 1. Question 1. Kama min haklaf. How far from the klaf, the parchment, sarach lahashir chelik b'rosh hasvarim hanigol b'soifon. So b'naviyim b'rosh, the beginning is kedei ligol omud, is one column. The sofa at the end is kedei ligol hekif, the entire circumference, because that's what you do. You have only one pole, and then for the other side is just wrapped around. Therefore, we want that much space on the end, so it's wrapped around. The Sefer Torah, kan v'kan kidei l'goyel omid. Both of them is just enough that there is enough of the space, about a column, so that it's able to go around the wooden rod. Because when it comes to a Sefer Torah, it's both sides as opposed to one. Okay, let's see maybe another question. TB 28, I think we did already. Chatzar she'ein bo shir chalukah, right? So that was actually the Havamina I wrote. Okay, question TA 28. Eza chiluk yesh ben galila Sefer Torah l'shar svarim. The Eza Sefer Torah haya goylin kishar svarim. So we didn't see the second half. But Svarim niglolim and chilasim l'seifan. The Sefer Torah le'emsi yasai. V'yisalo shnei amudim, because there's two pillars. And we're going to see Sefer Torah Shiva Ez Azara. The Sefer Torah in the Beis HaMikdash was actually not two, but it was actually one. But that we're not going to see until tomorrow's daf. Adkan.